What's up, folks? I'm Dan, and welcome to I've Been Meaning to Read That, the show where I read books out loud that I've been meaning to read. Let's go. Folks, I have been asking whether or not the Count's revenge is justified. You know, his plan to take down the Danglers, the Villeforts, and the Morcerfs. However, I think we need to rephrase the question, is the Count even getting his revenge? So far, all we've seen is that he has used some tricky communications strategies to get at Danglers' fortune, but Danglers is still crazy rich and a baron and a member of government. Now, the only other thing that he's done is kind of interrupt the marriage union between the Danglers and the Morcerfs. Remember, Albert is supposed to marry Eugenie Danglers, Danglers' daughter. But he hasn't really done much. I mean, obviously, the fake Italian nobility he created, Cavalcanti, is trying to make a move on Eugenie. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure the marriage union is still strong. I guess the only other thing that he's done to strike at the Morcerfs is he's got Albert set up to either realize that his father is a horrible person who betrayed the Pasha, Ali Tepelini, many years ago, or he's going to kill his friend who works at the newspaper that printed that Morcerf was the guy who betrayed Ali Pasha. Now, the current misfortunes affecting the Villeforts, that of Valentine's marriage contract with Franz d'Epinay falling apart because it's revealed that Noirtier killed d'Epinay's father, is not really up to the Count at all. The Count didn't do anything about that. And then the fact that Valentine's grandparents on her mother's side, the Saint Marans, have died, that was all Madame Villefort, Valentine's stepmom. She poisoned Madame Saint Maran, and the doctor thinks that somehow Madame de Villefort killed the Marquis de Saint Maran. And now Berrois is dead because Madame Villefort tried to kill Noirtier. Again, the Count had nothing to do with that at all. Just lots of horrible things are happening to Villefort. It almost makes you wonder if the Count even needs to swear vengeance against anybody because, I mean, their lives are kind of falling apart as is because they're just not very good people. Anyways, let's get into the story and find out what happens next. I have a hunch that Valentine is going to get blamed for poisoning all these people, even though everybody knows that Valentine is, you know, a sweet little angel who would never hurt anybody. But I guess the doctor has himself convinced, so maybe he can convince others. All right, let's find out what happens next. Chapter 81, The Room of the Retired Baker. The evening of the day on which the Count of Morcerf had left Danglers' house with feelings of shame and anger at the rejection of the projected alliance, Monsieur Andrea Cavalcanti, with curled hair, mustaches in perfect order, and white gloves which fitted admirably, had entered the courtyard of the banker's house in La Chaussée-d'Antin. He had not been more than 10 minutes in the drawing room before he drew Danglers aside into the recess of a box window and, after an ingenious preamble, related to him all his anxieties and cares since his noble father's departure. He acknowledged the extreme kindness which had been shown to him by the banker's family, in which he had been received as a son, and where, besides, his warmest affections had found an object on which to center, in Mademoiselle Danglers. Monsieur Danglers listened with the most profound attention. He had expected this declaration for the last 2 or 3 days, and when at last it came, his eyes glistened as much as they had lowered on listening to Morcerf. He would not, however, yield immediately to the young man's request, but made a few conscientious objections. "Are you not rather young, Monsieur Andrea, to think of marrying?" "I think not, sir," replied Monsieur Cavalcanti. "In Italy the nobility generally marry young. Life is so uncertain that we ought to secure happiness while it is within our reach." "Well, sir," said Danglers, "in case your proposals, which do me honor, are accepted by my wife and daughter, by whom shall the preliminary arrangements be settled? So important a negotiation should, I think, be conducted by the respective fathers of the young people. Sir, my father is a man of great foresight and prudence. Thinking that I might wish to settle in France, he left me, at his departure, together with the papers establishing my identity, a letter promising, if he approved of my choice, 150,000 livres per annum from the day I was married. So far as I cannot judge, I suppose this to be a quarter of my father's revenue. I, said Danglers, have always intended giving my daughter 500,000 francs as her dowry. She is, besides, my sole heiress. All would then be easily arranged if the Baroness and her daughter are willing. We should command an annuity of 175,000 livres. Supposing also I should persuade the Marquis to give me my capital, which is not likely, but still is possible, we would place these 2 or 3 millions in your hands, whose talent might make it realize 10%. I never give more than 4%, and generally only 3.5%, but to my son-in-law I would give 5%, and we would share the profit. Very good, father-in-law, said Cavalcanti, yielding to his low-born nature, which would escape sometimes through the aristocratic gloss with which he sought to conceal it. Correcting himself immediately, he said, Excuse me, sir. Hope alone makes me almost mad. What will not reality do? But, said Danglers, who, on his part, did not perceive how soon the conversation, which was at first disinterested, was turning to a business transaction, there is, doubtless, a part of your fortune your father could not refuse you? Which? Asked the young man. That you inherit from your mother. Truly, from my mother, Leonora Corsenari. How much may it amount to? Indeed, sir, said Andrea. I assure you I have never given the subject a thought, but I suppose it must have been at least 2 millions. Danglers felt as much overcome with joy as the miser who finds a lost treasure, or as the shipwrecked mariner who feels himself on solid ground instead of in the abyss which he expected would swallow him up. Well, sir, said Andrea, bowing to the banker respectfully. May I hope? You may not only hope, said Danglers, but consider it a settled thing if no obstacle arises on your part. I am indeed rejoiced, said Andrea. But, said Danglers thoughtfully, how is it that your patron, Monsieur de Monte Cristo, did not make this proposal for you? Andrea blushed imperceptibly. I have just left the Count, sir, said he. He is doubtless a delightful man, but inconceivably peculiar in his ideas. He esteems me highly. He even told me he had not the slightest doubt that my father would give me the capital instead of the interest of my property. He has promised to use his influence to obtain it for me, but he also declared that he never had taken on himself the responsibility of making proposals for another, and he never would. I must, however, do him the justice to add that he assured me if ever he had regretted the repugnance he felt to such a step, it was on this occasion, because he thought the projected union would be a happy and a suitable one. Besides, if he will do nothing officially, he will answer any questions you propose to him. And now, continued he, with one of his most charming smiles, having finished continuing to the father-in-law, I must address myself to the banker. And what may you have to say to him? Said Danglers, laughing in his turn. That the day after tomorrow I shall have to draw upon you for about 4,000 francs, but the Count, expecting my bachelor's revenue could not suffice for the coming month's outlay, has offered me a draft for 20,000 francs. It bears his signature, as you see, which is all sufficient. Bring me 1,000,000 such as that, said Danglers. I shall be well pleased, putting the draft in his pocket. Fix your own hour for tomorrow, and my cashier shall call on you with a check for 80,000 francs. At 10 o'clock, then, if you please. I should like it early, as I am going into the country tomorrow. Very well, at 10 o'clock. You are still at the Hotel des Princes? Yes. The following morning, with the banker's usual punctuality, the 80,000 francs were placed in the young man's hands as he was on the point of starting, after having left 200 francs for Caderouse. He went out chiefly to avoid this dangerous enemy, and returned as late as possible in the evening. But scarcely had he stepped out of his carriage when the porter met him with a parcel in his hand. Sir, said he, that man has been here. What the man? said Andrea carelessly, apparently forgetting him whom he but too well recollected. Him to whom your excellency pays that little annuity. Oh, said Andrea. My father's old servant. Well, you gave him the 200 francs I had left for him? Yes, your excellency. Andrea had expressed a wish to be thus addressed. But, continued the porter, he would not take them. Andrea turned pale, but as it was dark, his pallor was not perceptible. What? He would not take them, said he with slight emotion. No, he wished to speak to your excellency. I told him you were gone out, and after some dispute he believed me and gave me this letter, which he had brought with him already sealed. Give it to me, said Andrea, and he read by the light of his carriage lamp. You know where I live. I expect you tomorrow morning at 9. Andrea examined it carefully to ascertain if the letter had been opened or if any indiscreet eyes had seen its contents, but it was so carefully folded that no one could have read it, and the seal was perfect. Very well, said he. Poor man, he is a worthy creature. He left the porter to ponder on these words, not knowing which most to admire, the master or the servant. Take out the horses quickly, and come up to me, said Andrea to his groom. In 2 seconds, the young man had reached his room and burnt Caderousse's letter. The servant entered just as he had finished. You are about my height, Pierre, said he. I have that honor, your excellency. You had a new livery yesterday? Yes, sir. I have an engagement with a pretty little girl for this evening, and do not wish to be known. Lend me your livery until tomorrow. I may sleep, perhaps, at an inn. Pierre obeyed. 5 minutes after, Andrea left the hotel, completely disguised, took a cabriolet, and ordered the driver to take him to the Cheval Rouge at Picpus. The next morning, he left that inn as he had left the Hotel des Princes without being noticed, walked down the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, along the boulevard to Rue Ménilmontant, and stopped at the door of the third house on the left, looked for someone of whom to make an inquiry in the porter's absence. For whom are you looking, my fine fellow? Asked the fruiteress on the opposite side. Monsieur Pailletin, if you please, my good woman, replied Andrea. The retired baker? Asked the fruiteress. Exactly. He lives at the end of the yard on the left, on the 3rd story. Andrea went as she directed him, and on the 3rd floor he found a hare's paw, which, by the hasty ringing of the bell, it was evident he pulled with considerable ill temper. A moment after, Caderousse's face appeared at the grating in the door. Ah, you are punctual, said he, as he drew back the door. Confound you and your punctuality, said Andrea, throwing himself into a chair in a manner which implied that he would rather have flung it at the head of his host. Come, my little fellow, don't be angry. See, I have thought about you. Look at the good breakfast we are going to have. Nothing but what you are fond of. Andrea, indeed, inhaled the scent of something cooking, which was not unwelcome to him, hungry as he was. It was that mixture of fat and garlic peculiar to Provençal kitchens of an inferior order, added to that of dried fish, and above all, the pungent smell of musk and cloves. These odors escaped from 2 deep dishes which were covered and placed on a stove, and from a copper pan placed in an old iron pot. In an adjoining room, Andrea saw also a tolerably clean table prepared for 2 bottles of wine, sealed, the one with green, the other with yellow, a supply of brandy in a decanter, and a measure of fruit in a cabbage leaf, cleverly arranged on an earthenware plate. What do you think of it, my little fellow? Said Caderousse. Aye, that smells good. You know I used to be a famous cook. Do you recollect how you used to lick your fingers? You were among the first who tasted any of my dishes, and I think you relished them tolerably. While speaking, Caderousse went on peeling a fresh supply of onions. But, said Andrea, ill-temperedly, by my faith, if it was only to breakfast with you that you disturbed me, I wish the devil had taken you. My boy, said Caderousse, sententiously, one can talk while eating. And then, you ungrateful being, you are not pleased to see an old friend? I am weeping with joy. He was truly crying, but it would have been difficult to say whether joy or the onions produced the greatest effect on the lacrimal glands of the old innkeeper of the Pont du Gard. Hold your tongue, hypocrite, said Andrea. You love me. Yes, I do, or may the devil take me. I know it is a weakness, said Caderousse, but it overpowers me. and yet it has not prevented you sending for me to play some trick.
Come,
said Caderouse, wiping his large knife on his apron.
If I did not like you, do you think I should endure the wretched life you lead me? Think for a moment. You have your servant's clothes on. You therefore keep a servant. I have none, and am obliged to prepare my own meals. You abuse my cookery because you dine at the table d'hôte of the Hôtel des Princes, or the Café de Paris. Well, I too could keep a servant. I too could have a Tilbury. I too could dine where I like, but why do I not? Because I would not annoy my little Benedetto. Come, just acknowledge that I could, huh?
This address was accompanied by a look which was by no means difficult to understand. Well, said Andrea, admitting your love, why do you want me to breakfast with you?
That I may have the pleasure of seeing you, my little fellow.
What is the use of seeing me after we have made all our arrangements?
Dear friend, said Caderouse, are wills ever made without codicils? But you first came to breakfast, did you not? Well, sit down, and let us begin with these pilchards and this fresh butter, which I put on some vine leaves to please you, wicked one. Ah, yes, you look at my room, my 4 straw chairs, my images, 3 francs each. But what do you expect? This is not the Hôtel des Princes.
Come, you are growing discontented. You are no longer happy. You who only wish to live like a retired baker. Caderouse sighed. Well, what have you to say? You have seen your dream realized.
I can still say it is a dream. A retired baker, my poor Benedetto, is rich. He has an annuity.
Well, you have an annuity.
I have?
Yes, since I bring you your 200 francs. Caderouse shrugged his shoulders.
It is humiliating, said he, thus to receive money given grudgingly, an uncertain supply which may soon fail. You see, I am obliged to economize in case your prosperity should cease. Well, my friend, fortune is inconsistent, as the chaplain of the regiment said. I know your prosperity is great, you rascal. You're to marry the daughter of Danglers.
What? Of Danglers?
Yes, to be sure. Must I say Baron Danglers? I might as well say Count Benedetto. He was an old friend of mine, and if he had not so bad a memory, he ought to invite me to your wedding, seeing he came to mine. Yes, to mine. Gad, he was not so proud then. He was an underclerk to the good Monsieur Morel. I have dined many times with him and the Count de Morcerf, so you see, I have some connections, and were I to cultivate them a little, we might meet in the same drawing rooms.
Come, your jealousy represents everything to you in the wrong light.
That is all very fine, Benedetto mio, but I know what I am saying. Perhaps I may one day put on my best coat, and, presenting myself at the great gate, introduce myself. Meanwhile, let us sit down and eat.
Caderouse set the example and attacked the breakfast with good appetite, praising each dish he set before his visitor. The latter seemed to have resigned himself. He drew the corks and partook largely of the fish with the garlic and fat.
Ah, mate, said Caderouse, you are getting on better terms with your old landlord.
Faith, yes, replied Andrea, whose hunger prevailed over every other feeling.
So you like it, you rogue?
So much that I wonder how a man who can cook thus can complain of hard living.
Do you see, said Caderouse, all my happiness is marred by one thought.
What is that?
That I am dependent on another, I who have always gained my own livelihood honestly.
Do not let that disturb you. I have enough for 2.
No, truly, you may believe me if you will. At the end of every month I am tormented by remorse.
Good Caderouse.
So much so that yesterday I would not take the 200 francs.
Yes, you wished to speak to me, but was it indeed remorse? Tell me.
True remorse, and besides, an idea had struck me.
Andrea shuddered. He always did so at Caderouse's ideas.
It is miserable, do you see? Always to wait till the end of the month.
Oh, said Andrea philosophically, determined to watch his companion narrowly. Does not life pass in waiting? Do I, for instance, fare better? Well, I wait patiently, do I not?
Yes, because instead of expecting 200 wretched francs, you expect 5,000 or 6,000, perhaps 10, perhaps even 12, for you take care not to let anyone know the utmost. Down there, you always had little presents and Christmas boxes, which you tried to hide from your poor friend Caderouse. Fortunately, he is a cunning fellow, that friend Caderouse.
There, you are beginning to ramble, to talk again and again of the past. But what is the use of teasing me with going all over that again?
Oh, you are only 1 in 20, and can forget the past. I'm 50, and am obliged to recollect it. But let us return to business.
Yes.
I was going to say, if I were in your place,
well,
I would realize...
How would you realize?
I would ask for 6 months in advance, under pretense of being able to purchase a farm. Then with my 6 months, I would decamp.
Well, said Andrea, that is not a bad idea.
My dear friend, said Caderouse, eat of my bread and take my advice. You will be none the worse off, physically or morally.
But, said Andrea, why do you not act on the advice you gave me? Why do you not realize a 6 months, a year's advance even, and retire to Brussels? Instead of living the retired baker, you might live as a bankrupt, using his privileges. That would be very good.
How the devil would you have me retire on 1,200 francs?
Ah, Caderouse, said Andrea, how covetous you are. 2 months ago you were dying with a hunger.
The appetite grows by what it feeds on,
said Caderouse, grinning and showing his teeth, like a monkey laughing, or a tiger growling.
And, added he, biting off with his large white teeth an enormous mouthful of bread, I have formed a plan.
Caderouse's plans alarmed Andrea still more than his ideas. Ideas were but the germ, the plan was reality. Let me see your plan. I dare say it is a pretty one.
Why not? Who formed the plan by which we left the establishment of Monsieur? Huh? Was it not I? And it was no bad one, I believe, since here we are.
I do not say, replied Andrea, that you never make a good one, but let us see your plan.
Well,
pursued Caderousse,
can you, without expending 1 sou, put me in the way of getting 15,000 francs? No, 15,000 are not enough. I cannot again become an honest man with less than 30,000.
No, replied Andrea dryly. No, I cannot.
I do not think you understand me, replied Caderousse calmly. I said without your laying out a sou.
Do you want me to commit a robbery, to spoil all of my good fortune, and yours with mine, and both of us to be dragged down there again?
It would make very little difference to me, said Caderousse. If I were retaken, I am a poor creature to live alone, and sometimes pine for my old comrades, not like you, you heartless creature, who would be glad never to see them again.
Andrea did more than tremble this time. He turned pale. Come, Caderousse, no nonsense, said he.
Don't alarm yourself, my little Benedetto, but just point out to me some means of gaining those 30,000 francs without your assistance, and I will contrive it.
Well, I'll see. I'll try to contrive some way, said Andrea.
Meanwhile, you will raise my monthly allowance to 500 francs. I have a fancy and mean to get a housekeeper.
Well, you shall have your 500 francs, said Andrea. But it is very hard for me, my poor Caderousse. You take advantage.
Bah, said Caderousse, when you have access to countless stores.
One would have said Andrea anticipated his companion's words, so did his eye flash like lightning, but it was but for a moment. True, he replied, and my protector is very kind.
That dear protector, said Caderousse. And how much does he give you monthly?
5,000.
As many thousands as you give me hundreds. Truly, it is only bastards who are thus fortunate. 5,000 francs per month. What the devil can you do with all that?
Oh, it is no trouble to spend that. And I am like you, I want the capital.
Capital? Yes, I understand. Everyone would like capital.
Well, and I shall get it.
Who will give it to you? Your prince?
Yes, my prince. But unfortunately, I must wait.
You must wait for what?
Asked Caderousse. For his death.
The death of your prince?
Yes.
How so?
Because he has made his will in my favor.
Indeed?
On my honor.
For how much?
For 500,000.
Only that? It's little enough.
But so it is.
No, it cannot be.
Are you my friend, Caderouse?
Yes, in life or death.
Well, I would tell you a secret.
What is it?
But remember...
Ah, pardieu, mute as a carp.
Well, I think... Andrea stopped and looked around.
You think? Do not fear, pardieu, we are alone.
I think I have discovered my father.
Your true father?
Yes.
Not old Cavalcanti?
No, for he is gone again. The true one, as you say.
And that father is?
Well, Caderouse, it is a Monte Cristo.
Bah!
Yes, you understand. That explains all. He cannot acknowledge me openly, it appears, but he does it through Monsieur Cavalcanti and gives him 50,000 francs for it.
50,000 francs? For being your father? I would have done it for half that, for 20,000, for 15. Why did you not think of me, you ungrateful man?
Did I know anything about it when it was all done, when I was down there?
Not truly? And you say that by his will...
He leaves me 500,000 livres.
Are you sure of it?
He showed it to me, but that is not all. There is a codicil, as I said just now.
Probably.
And in that codicil, he acknowledges me.
Oh, the good father, the brave father, the very honest father, said Caderouse, twirling a plate in the air between his two hands.
Now say if I conceal anything from you.
No, and your confidence makes you honorable in my opinion. And your princely father, is he rich, very rich?
Yes, he is that. He does not himself know the amount of his fortune.
Is it possible?
It is evident enough to me, who am always at his house. The other day, a banker's clerk brought him 50,000 francs in a portfolio about the size of your plate. Yesterday, his banker brought him 100,000 francs in gold. Caderouse was filled with wonder. The young man's words sounded to him like metal, and he thought he could hear the rushing of cascades of louis.
And you go into that house?
Cried he briskly. When I like. Caderouse was thoughtful for a moment. It was easy to perceive he was revolving some unfortunate idea in his mind. Then, suddenly,
How I should like to see all that, cried he. How beautiful it must be.
It is, in fact, magnificent, said Andrea.
And does he not live in the Champs-Élysées?
Yes, number 30.
Ah, said Caderouse. Number 30.
Yes, a fine house standing alone between a courtyard and a garden. You must know it.
Possibly, but it is not the exterior I care for. It's the interior. What beautiful furniture there must be in it.
Have you ever been to the Tuileries?
No.
Well, it surpasses that.
It must be worth one's while to stoop, Andrea, when that good Monsieur Monte Cristo lets fall his purse.
It is not worthwhile to wait for that, said Andrea. Money is as plentiful in that house as fruit in an orchard.
But you should take me there one day with you.
How can I? On what plea?
You're right, but you've made my mouth water. I must absolutely see it. I shall find a way.
No nonsense, Caderouse.
I will offer myself as a floor polisher.
The rooms are all carpeted.
Well then, I must be contented to imagine it.
That is the best plan, believe me.
Try, at least, to give me an idea of what it is.
How can I?
Nothing is easier. Is it large?
Middling.
How is it arranged?
Faith, I should require pen, ink, and paper to make a plan.
They're all here,
said Caderouse briskly. He fetched from an old secretary desk a sheet of white paper and pen and ink.
Here, said Caderouse. Draw me all that on the paper, my boy.
Andrea took the pen with an imperceptible smile and began. The house, as I said, is between the court and the garden. In this way, do you see? Andrea drew the garden, the court, and the house.
High walls?
Not more than 8 or 10 feet.
That's not prudent, said Caderouse.
In the court are orange trees and pots, a turf, and clumps of flowers.
And no steel traps?
No.
The stables?
Are on either side of the gate, which you see there. And Andrea continued his plan.
Let us see the ground floor, said Caderouse.
On the ground floor, dining room, 2 drawing rooms, billiard room, staircase in the hall, and a little back staircase.
Windows?
Magnificent windows, so beautiful, so large, that I believe a man of your size should pass through each frame.
Why the devil have they any stairs with such windows?
Luxury has everything.
But shutters?
Yes, but they are never used. That Count of Monte Cristo is an original. He loves to look at the sky, even at night.
And where do the servants sleep?
Oh, they have the house to themselves. Picture to yourself a pretty coach house at the right-hand side where the letters are kept. Well, over that coach house are the servants' rooms, with the bells corresponding with the different apartments.
Diable. Bells, did you say?
What do you mean?
Oh, nothing. I only say they cost a load of money to hang, and what is the use of them, I should like to know.
There used to be a dog let loose in the yard at night, but it has been taken to the house at Autiel, to that you went to, you know.
Yes.
I was saying to him only yesterday, you are imprudent, Monsieur Count, for when you go to Autiel and take your servants, the house is left unprotected. Well, said he, what next? Well, next, some day you will be robbed.
What did he answer?
He quietly said, what do I care if I am?
Andrea, he has some secretary desk with a spring.
How do you know?
Yes, which catches the thief in a trap and plays a tune. I was told there was such at the last exhibition.
He has simply a mahogany secretariat desk in which the key is always kept.
And he is not robbed?
No, his servants are all devoted to him.
There ought to be some money in that secretary desk.
There may be. No one knows what there is.
And where is it?
On the first floor.
Sketch me a plan of that floor, as you've done of the ground floor, my boy.
That is very simple. Andrea took the pen. On the first story, do you see, there is the anteroom and the drawing room. To the right of the drawing room, a library and a study. To the left, a bedroom and a dressing room. The famous secretariat desk is in the dressing room.
Is there a window in the dressing room?
2. One here and one there. Andrea sketched 2 windows in the room, which formed an angle on the plan, and appeared as a small square added to the rectangle of the bedroom. Caderouse became thoughtful.
Does he often go to Autiel?
Added he. 2 or 3 times a week. Tomorrow, for instance, he is going to spend the day and the night there.
Are you sure of it?
He has invited me to dine there.
There's a life for you, said Caderouse. A townhouse and a country house.
That is what it is to be rich.
And shall you dine there?
Probably.
When you dine there, do you sleep there?
If I like, I am at home there. Caderouse looked at the young man as if to get the truth from the bottom of his heart. But Andrea drew a cigar case from his pocket, took a Havana, quietly lit it, and began smoking. When do you want your 1,200 francs? Said he to Caderouse.
Now, if you have them.
Andrea took 25 louis from his pocket.
Yellow boys? Said Caderouse. No, I thank you.
Oh, you despise them?
On the contrary, I esteem them, but will not have them.
You cannot change them, idiot. Gold is worth 5 sous.
Exactly, and he who changes them will follow friend Caderouse, lay hands on him, and demand what farmers pay him their rent in gold. No nonsense, my good fellow. Silver, simply. Round coins with the head of some monarch or other on them. Anybody may possess a 5-franc piece.
But do you suppose I carry 500 francs about with me? I should want a porter.
Well, leave them with your porter. He's to be trusted. I will call for them.
Today?
No, tomorrow. I shall not have time today.
Well, tomorrow I will leave them when I go to Autiel.
May I depend on it?
Certainly.
Because I shall secure my housekeeper on the strength of it.
Now see here. Will that be all, eh? And will you not torment me any more?
Never.
Caderouse had become so gloomy that Andrea feared he should be obliged to notice the change. He redoubled his gaiety and carelessness.
How sprightly you are, said Caderouse. One would say you were already in possession of your property.
No, unfortunately, but when I do obtain it...
Well?
I shall remember old friends, I can tell you that.
Yes, since you have such a good memory.
What do you want? It looks as if you were trying to fleece me.
I? What an idea. I, who am going to give you another piece of good advice.
What is it?
To leave behind you the diamond you have on your finger. We shall both get into trouble. You will ruin both yourself and me by your folly.
How so? Said Andrea.
How? You put on a livery, you disguise yourself as a servant, and yet you keep a diamond on your finger worth 4,000 or 5,000 francs.
You guess well.
I know something of diamonds. I've had some.
You do well to boast of it, said Andrea, who, without becoming angry, as Caderouse feared, at this new extortion, quietly resigned the ring. Caderouse looked so closely at it that Andrea well knew that he was examining to see if all the edges were perfect.
It is a false diamond, said Caderouse.
You are joking now, replied Andrea.
Do not be angry. We can try it.
Caderouse went to the window, touched the glass with it, and found it would cut.
Confidior, said Caderouse, putting the diamond on his little finger. I was mistaken, but those thieves of jewelers imitate so well that it is no longer worthwhile to rob a jeweler's shop. It is another branch of industry, paralyzed.
Have you finished? Said Andrea. Do you want anything more? Will you have my waistcoat or my hat? Make free now you have begun.
No, you are, after all, a good companion. I will not detain you, and will try to cure myself of my ambition.
But take care the same thing does not happen to you in selling the diamond you feared with the gold.
I shall not sell it, do not fear.
Not at least till the day after tomorrow, thought the young man.
Happy rogue, said Caderouse. You are going to find your servants, your horses, your carriage, and your betrothed.
Yes, said Andrea.
Well, I hope you will make a handsome wedding present the day you marry Mademoiselle Danglers.
I have already told you it is a fancy you have taken in your head.
What fortune has she?
But I tell you...
1,000,000?
Andrea shrugged his shoulders.
Let it be 1,000,000, said Caderouse. You can never have so much as I wish you.
Thank you, said the young man.
Oh, I wish it you with all my heart, added Caderouse with his hoarse laugh. Stop, let me show you the way.
It is not worthwhile.
Yes, it is.
Why?
Because there is a little secret, a precaution I thought it desirable to take, one of Huret and Fidget's locks, revised and improved by Gaspard Caderousse. I will manufacture you a similar one when you are a capitalist.
Thank you, said Andrea. I will let you know a week beforehand. They parted. Caderousse remained on the landing until he had not only seen Andrea go down the 3 stories, but also crossed the court. Then he returned hastily, shut his door carefully, and began to study, like a clever architect, the plan Andrea had left him.
Dear Benedetto, said he, I think you will not be sorry to inherit his fortune, and he who hastens the day when he can touch his 500,000 will not be his worst friend.
End of Chapter 81. Chapter 82. The Burglary. The day following that on which the conversation we have related took place, the Count of Monte Cristo set out for Autiel, accompanied by Ali and several attendants, and also taking with him some horses, whose qualities he was desirous of ascertaining. He was induced to undertake this journey, of which the day before he had not even thought, and which had not occurred to Andrea either, by the arrival of Bertuccio from Normandy with intelligence respecting the house and sloop. The house was ready, and the sloop, which had arrived a week before, lay at anchor in a small creek with a crew of 6 men, who had observed all the requisite formalities and were ready again to put to sea. The Count praised Bertuccio's zeal, and ordered him to prepare for a speedy departure, as his stay in France would not be prolonged more than a month. Now, said he, I may require to go in one night from Paris to Tréport. Let 8 fresh horses be in readiness on the road, which will enable me to go 50 leagues in 10 hours. Your Highness has already expressed that wish, said Bertuccio, and the horses are ready. I have bought them, and stationed them myself at the most desirable outposts, that is, in villages where no one generally stops. That's well, said Monte Cristo. I remain here a day or 2. Arrange accordingly. As Bertuccio was leaving the room to give the requisite orders, Baptistine opened the door. He held a letter on a silver waiter. What are you doing here? Asked the Count, seeing him covered with dust. I did not send for you, I think. Baptistine, without answering, approached the Count and presented the letter. Important and urgent, said he. The Count opened the letter and read, Monsieur de Monte Cristo is apprised that this night a man will enter his house in the Champs-Élysées with the intention of carrying off some papers supposed to be in the secretary desk in the dressing room. The Count's well-known courage will render unnecessary the aid of the police, whose interference might seriously affect him who sends this advice. The Count, by any opening from the bedroom, or by concealing himself in the dressing room, would be able to defend his property himself. Many attendants or apparent precautions would prevent the villain from the attempt, and Monsieur de Monte Cristo would lose the opportunity of discovering an enemy whom chance has revealed to him, who now sends this warning to the Count. A warning he might not be able to send another time, if this first attempt should fail and another be made. The Count's first idea was that this was an artifice, a gross deception, to draw his attention from a minor danger in order to expose him to a greater. He was on the point of sending the letter to the commissary of police, notwithstanding the advice of his anonymous friend, or perhaps because of that advice, when suddenly the idea occurred to him that it might be some personal enemy whom he alone should recognize, and over whom, if such were the case, he alone would gain any advantage, as Fiesco had done over the Moor who would have killed him. We know the Count's vigorous and daring mind, denying anything to be impossible, with that energy which marks the great man. From his past life, from his resolution to shrink from nothing, the Count had acquired an inconceivable relish for the contests in which he had engaged, sometimes against nature, that is to say, against God, and sometimes against the world, that is, against the devil. "They do not want my papers," said Monte Cristo. "They want to kill me. They're no robbers, but assassins. I will not allow the prefect of police to interfere with my private affairs. I am rich enough, forsooth, to distribute his authority on this occasion." The Count recalled Baptistine, who had left the room after delivering the letter. "Return to Paris," said he. "Assemble the servants who remain there. I want all my household at Autiel." "But no one will remain in the house, my lord?" asked Baptistine. "Yes, the porter." "My lord will remember that the lodge is at a distance from the house." "Well?" "The house might be stripped without his hearing the least noise." "By whom?" "By thieves." "You are a fool, Monsieur Baptistine. Thieves might strip the house. It would annoy me less than to be disobeyed." Baptistine bowed. "You understand me?" said the Count. "Bring your comrades here, one and all, but let everything remain as usual, only close the shutters of the ground floor." "And those of the first floor?" "You know they're never closed. Go." The Count signified his intention of dining alone, and that no one but Ali should attend him. Having dined with his usual tranquillity and moderation, the Count, making a signal to Ali to follow him, went out by the side gate, and on reaching the Bois de Boulogne, turned, apparently without design, towards Paris, and at twilight he found himself opposite his house in the Champs-Élysées. All was dark. One solitary, feeble light was burning in the porter's lodge, about 40 paces distant from the house, as Baptistine had said. Monte Cristo leaned against a tree, and with that scrutinizing glance which was so rarely deceived, looked up and down the avenue, examining the passers-by, and carefully looked down the neighboring streets to see that no one was concealed. 10 minutes passed thus, and he was convinced that no one was watching him. He hastened to the side door with Ali, entered hurriedly, and by the servants' staircase, of which he had the key, gained his bedroom without opening or disarranging a single curtain, without even the porter having the slightest suspicion that the house, which he supposed empty, contained its chief occupant. Arrived in his bedroom, the Count motioned to Ali to stop. Then he passed into the dressing-room, which he examined. Everything appeared as usual, the precious secretary desk in its place, and the key in the secretary desk. He double-locked it, took the key, returned to the bedroom door, removed the double staple of the bolt, and went in. Meanwhile, Ali had procured the arms the Count required, namely a short carbine with a pair of double-barreled pistols, with which are sure an aim might be taken as with a single-barreled one. Thus armed, the Count held the lives of 5 men in his hands. It was about 9:30. The Count and Ali ate in haste a crust of bread and drank a glass of Spanish wine. Then Monte Cristo slipped aside one of the movable panels which enabled him to see into the adjoining room. He had within his reach his pistols and carbine, and Ali, standing near him, held one of the small Arabian hatchets whose form has not varied since the Crusades. Through one of the windows of the bedroom, on a line with that in the dressing-room, the Count could see into the street. 2 hours passed thus. It was intensely dark. Still, Ali, thanks to his wild nature, and the Count, thanks doubtless to his long confinement, could distinguish in the darkness the slightest movement of the trees. The little light in the lodge had long been extinct. It might be expected that the attack, if indeed an attack was projected, would be made from the staircase of the ground floor, and not from a window. In Monte Cristo's opinion, the villain sought his life, not his money. It would be his bedroom they would attack, and they must reach it by the back staircase or by the window in the dressing room. The clock of the Invalides struck 11:45. The west wind bore on its moistened gusts the doleful vibration of the 3 strokes. As the last stroke died away, the Count thought he heard a slight noise in the dressing room. This first sound, or rather this first grinding, was followed by a second, then a third. At the 4th, the Count knew what to expect. A firm and well-practiced hand was engaged in cutting the 4 sides of a pane of glass with a diamond. The Count felt his heart beat more rapidly. Inured as men may be to danger, forewarned as they may be of peril, they understand, by the fluttering of the heart and the shuddering of the frame, the enormous difference between a dream and a reality, between the project and the execution. However, Monte Cristo only made a sign to apprise Ali, who, understanding that danger was approaching from the other side, drew nearer to his master. Monte Cristo was eager to ascertain the strength and number of his enemies. The window whence the noise proceeded was opposite the opening by which the Count could see into the dressing room. He fixed his eyes on that window. He distinguished a shadow in the darkness. Then one of the panes became quite opaque, as if a sheet of paper were struck on the outside. Then the square cracked without falling. Through the opening an arm was passed to find the fastening. Then a second. The window turned on its hinges, and a man entered. He was alone. "That's a daring rascal," whispered the Count. At that moment Ali touched him slightly on the shoulder. He turned. Ali pointed to the window of the room in which they were facing the street. "I see," said he. "There are 2 of them. One does the work while the other stands guard." He made a sign to Ali not to lose sight of the man in the street, and turned to the one in the dressing room. The glass cutter had entered, and was feeling his way, his arms stretched out before him. At last he appeared to have made himself familiar with his surroundings. There were 2 doors. He bolted them both. When he drew near to the bedroom door, Monte Cristo expected that he was coming in, and raised one of his pistols. But he simply heard the sound of the bolts sliding in their copper rings. It was only a precaution. The nocturnal visitor, ignorant of the fact that the Count had removed the staples, might now think himself at home, and pursue his purpose with full security. Alone, and free to act as he wished, the man then drew from his pocket something which the Count could not discern, placed it on a stand, then went straight to the secretary desk. He felt the lock, and contrary to his expectation, found that the key was missing. But the glass cutter was a prudent man who had provided for all emergencies. The Count soon heard the rattling of a bunch of skeleton keys, such as the locksmith brings when called to force a lock, and which thieves call nightingales, doubtless from the music of their nightly song when they grind against the bolt. "Aha," whispered Monte Cristo with a smile of disappointment. "He's only a thief." But the man in the dark could not find the right key. He reached the instrument he had placed on the stand, touched a spring, and immediately a pale light, just bright enough to render objects distinct, was reflected on his hands and countenance. "By heavens!" exclaimed Monte Cristo, staring back. "It's—" Ali raised his hatchet. "Don't stir," whispered Monte Cristo, "and put down your hatchet. We shall require no arms." Then he added some words in a low tone, for the exclamation which surprise had drawn from the Count, faint as it had been, had startled the man who remained in the pose of the old knife grinder. It was an order the Count had just given, for immediately Ali went noiselessly and returned, bearing a black dress and a 3-cornered hat. Meanwhile, Monte Cristo had rapidly taken off his greatcoat, waistcoat, and shirt, and one might distinguish by the glimmering through the open panels that he wore a pliant tunic of steel mail, of which the last in France, where daggers were no longer dreaded, was worn by King Louis XVI, who feared the dagger at his breast, and whose head was cleft with a hatchet. The tunic soon disappeared under a long cassock, as did his hair under a priest's wig. The 3-cornered hat over this effectually transformed the Count into an abbé. The man, hearing nothing more, stood erect, and while Monte Cristo was completing his disguise, had advanced straight to the secretary desk, whose lock was beginning to crack under his nightingale. "Try again," whispered the Count, who depended on the secret spring, which was unknown to the picklock, clever as he might be. "Try again. You have a few minutes' work there." And he advanced to the window. The man whom he had seen seated on a fence had got down and was still pacing the street. But strange as it appeared, he cared not for those who might pass from the avenue of the Champs-Élysées or by the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. His attention was engrossed with what was passing at the Count's, and his only aim appeared to be to discern every movement in the dressing-room. Monte Cristo suddenly struck his finger on his forehead, and a smile passed over his lips. Then, drawing near to Ali, he whispered, "Remain here, concealed in the dark, and whatever noise you hear, whatever passes, only come in or show yourself if I call you." Ali bowed in token of strict obedience. Monte Cristo then drew a lighted taper from a closet, and when the thief was deeply engaged with his lock, silently opened the door, taking care that the light should shine directly on his face. The door opened so quietly that the thief heard no sound, but, to his astonishment, the room was suddenly illuminated. He turned. "Ah, good evening, my dear Monsieur Caderouse," said Monte Cristo in the voice of Busoni. "What are you doing here at such an hour?"
"The Abbé Busoni!"
exclaimed Caderousse, and, not knowing how this strange apparition could have entered when he had bolted the doors, he let fall his bunch of keys and remained motionless and stupefied. The Count placed himself between Caderousse and the window, thus cutting off from the thief his only chance of retreat.
"The Abbé Busoni!"
repeated Caderousse, fixing his haggard gaze on the Count. "Yes, undoubtedly, the Abbé Busoni himself," replied Monte Cristo. "And I am very glad you recognize me, dear Monsieur Caderousse. It proves you have a good memory, for it must be about 10 years since we last met." This calmness of Busoni, combined with his irony and boldness, staggered Caderousse.
"The Abbé!
The Abbé!" murmured he, clenching his fists and his teeth chattering. "So, you would rob the Count of Monte Cristo?" continued the false Abbé.
"Reverend sir,"
murmured Caderousse, seeking to regain the window, which the Count pitilessly blocked.
"Reverend sir, I didn't know, but believe me, I take my oath."
"A pane of glass out," continued the Count. "A dark lantern, a bunch of false keys, a secretary desk half forced. It is tolerably evident." Caderousse was choking. He looked around for some corner to hide in, some way of escape. "Come, come," continued the Count. "I see you are still the same, an assassin."
"Reverend sir, since you know everything, you know it was not I. It was La Carsante. That was proved at the trial, since I was only condemned to the galleys."
"Is your time, then, expired, since I find you in a fair way to return there?"
"No, reverend sir. I've been liberated by someone."
"That someone has done society a great kindness."
"Ah," said Caderousse, "I had promised."
"And you are breaking your promise," interrupted Monte Cristo.
"Alas, yes,"
said Caderousse very uneasily. "A bad relapse that will lead you, if I mistake not, to the Place de Grève. So much the worse, so much the worse. Diavolo, as they say in my country."
"Reverend sir, I am impelled."
"Every criminal says the same thing.
Poverty."
"Pshaw," said Busoni disdainfully. "Poverty may make a man beg, steal a loaf of bread at a baker's door, but not cause him to open a secretariat desk in a house supposed to be inhabited. And when the jeweler Johannes had just paid you 45,000 francs for the diamond I had given you, and you killed him to get the diamond and the money both, was that also a poverty?"
"Pardon, reverend sir," said Caderousse. "You have saved my life once. Save me again."
"That is but a poor encouragement."
"Are you alone, reverend sir, or have you there soldiers ready to seize me?"
"I am alone," said the Abbé, "and I will again have pity on you, and will let you escape, at the risk of the fresh miseries my weakness may lead to, if you will tell me the truth."
"Oh, reverend sir,"
cried Caderousse, clasping his hands and drawing nearer to Monte Cristo,
"I may indeed say you are my deliverer."
"You mean to say you have been freed from confinement?"
"Yes, that is true, reverend sir."
"Who was your liberator?"
"An Englishman."
"What was his name?"
"Lord Wilmore."
"I know him. I shall know if you lie."
"Reverend sir, I am telling you the simple truth."
"Was this Englishman protecting you?"
No, not me, but a young Corsican, my companion.
What was this a young Corsican's name?
Benedetto.
Is that his Christian name?
He had no other. He was a foundling.
Then this young man escaped with you?
He did.
In what way?
We were working at Saint-Mandrier, near Toulon. Do you know Saint-Mandrier?
I do.
In the hour of rest, between noon and 1 o'clock.
Galley slaves having a nap after dinner. Ha! We may well pity the poor fellows, said the abbé.
Nay, said Caderousse. One can't always work. One's not a dog.
So much the better for the dogs, said Monte Cristo.
While the rest slept, then, we went away a short distance. We severed our fetters with a file the Englishman had given us and swam away.
And what is become of this Benedetto?
I don't know.
You ought to know.
No, in truth, we parted at Hyères.
And, to give more weight to his protestation, Caderousse advanced another step towards the abbé, who remained motionless in his place, as calm as ever, and pursuing his interrogation. You lie, said the abbé, with a tone of irresistible authority.
Reverend.
You lie. This man is still your friend, and you, perhaps, make a use of him as your accomplice.
Reverend, sir.
Since you left Toulon, what have you lived on? Answer me.
On what I could get.
You lie, repeated the abbé a third time, with a still more imperative tone. Caderousse, terrified, looked at the count. You have lived on the money he has given you.
True, said Caderousse. Benedetto has become the son of a great lord.
How can he be the son of a great lord?
A natural son.
And what is that great lord's name?
The Count of Monte Cristo, the very same in whose house are we.
Benedetto, the count's son? Replied Monte Cristo, astonished in his turn.
Well, I should think so, since the count has found him a false father, since the count gives him 4,000 francs a month and leaves him 500,000 in his will.
Ah, yes, said the fictitious abbé, who began to understand. And what name does the young man bear meanwhile?
Andre Cavalcanti.
Is it, then, that young man whom my friend the count has received into his house, and who is going to marry Mademoiselle Danglers?
Exactly.
And you suffer that, you wretch? You, who know his life and his crime?
Why should I stand in a comrade's way? Said Caderousse.
You are right. It is not you who should apprise Monsieur Danglers. It is I.
Do not do so, Reverend.
Why not?
Because you would bring us to ruin.
And you think that to save such villains as you, I will become an abettor of their plot, an accomplice in their crimes?
Reverend sir,
said Caderousse, drawing still nearer, I will expose all.
To whom?
To Monsieur Danglers.
By heaven,
cried Caderousse, drawing from his waistcoat an open knife and striking the count in the breast.
You shall disclose nothing.
To Caderousse's great astonishment, the knife, instead of piercing the count's breast, flew back blunted. At the same moment the count seized with his left hand the assassin's wrist, and wrung it with such strength that the knife fell from his stiffened hands, and Caderousse uttered a cry of pain. But the count, disregarding his cry, continued to wring the bandit's wrist, until, his arm being dislocated, he fell first on his knees, then flat on the floor. The count then placed his foot on his head, saying, I know not what restrains me from crushing thy skull, rascal.
Mercy, mercy,
cried Caderousse. The count withdrew his foot. Rise, said he. Caderousse rose.
What a wrist you have, Reverend,
said Caderousse, stroking his arm, all bruised by the fleshy pincers which had held it.
What a wrist!
Silence! God gives me strength to overcome a wild beast like you. In the name of that God I act. Remember that, wretch, and to spare thee at this moment is still serving him.
Ah,
said Caderousse, groaning with pain. Take this pen and the paper, and write what I dictate.
I don't know how to write, Reverend.
You lie. Take this pen and write. Caderousse, awed by the superior power of the abbé, sat down and wrote. Sir, the man whom you are receiving at your house, and to whom you intend to marry your daughter, is a felon who escaped with me from confinement at Toulon. He was number 59, and I number 58. He was called Benedetto, but he is ignorant of his real name, having never known his parents.
Sign it, continued the Count. But would you ruin me?
If I sought your ruin, fool, I should drag you to the first guardhouse. Besides, when that note is delivered, in all probability you will have no more to fear. Sign it then.
Caderouse signed it.
The address, to Monsieur the Baron Danglers, banker, Rue de la Chaussée d'Antin. Caderouse wrote the address. The abbé took the note. Now, said he, that suffices. Begone.
Which way?
The way you came.
You wish me to get out that window?
You got in very well.
Oh, you have some design against me, Reverend.
Idiot, what design can I have?
Why, then not let me out by the door.
What would be the advantage of awaking the porter?
Oh, Reverend, tell me, do you wish me dead?
I wish what God wills.
But swear that you will not strike me as I go down.
Cowardly fool.
What do you intend doing with me?
I ask you, what can I do? I have tried to make you a happy man, and you have turned out a murderer.
Oh, monsieur, said Caderouse, make one more attempt. Try me once more.
I will, said the Count. Listen, you know if I may be relied on.
Yes, said Caderouse.
If you arrive safely at home,
what have I to fear except from you?
If you will reach your home safely, leave Paris, leave France, and wherever you may be, so long as you conduct yourself well, I will send you a small annuity. For if you return home safely, then...
Then?
asked Caderouse, shuddering. Then I shall believe God has forgiven you, and I will forgive you too.
As true as I am a Christian, stammered Caderouse, you will make me die of fright.
Now, begone, said the Count, pointing to the window. Caderouse, scarcely yet relying on this promise, put his legs out the window and stood on the ladder. Now, go down, said the abbé, folding his arms. Understanding he had nothing more to fear from him, Caderousse began to go down. Then the Count brought the taper to the window, that it might be seen in the Champs-Élysées that a man was getting out of the window while another held a light.
What are you doing, Reverend? Suppose a watchman should pass.
And he blew out the light. He then descended, but it was only when he felt his foot touch the ground that he was satisfied of his safety. Monte Cristo returned to his bedroom, and, glancing rapidly from the garden to the street, he saw first Caderousse, who, after walking to the end of the garden, fixed his ladder against the wall at a different part from where he came in. The Count, then looking over into the street, saw the man who appeared to be waiting run in the same direction and place himself against the angle of the wall where Caderousse would come over. Caderousse climbed the ladder slowly and looked over the coping to see if the street was quiet. No one could be seen or heard. The clock of the Invalides struck 1. Then Caderousse sat astride the coping and, drawing up his ladder, passed it over the wall. Then he began to descend, or rather to slide down by the 2 stanchions, which he did with an ease which proved how accustomed he was to the exercise. But, once started, he could not stop. In vain did he see a man start from the shadow when he was halfway down. In vain did he see an arm raised as he struck the ground. Before he could defend himself, that arm struck him so violently in the back that he let go the ladder, crying, "Help!" A second blow struck him almost immediately in the side, and he fell, calling, "Help! Murder!" Then, as he rolled on the ground, his adversary seized him by the hair and struck him a third blow in the chest. This time, Caderousse endeavored to call again, but he could only utter a groan, and he shuddered as the blood flowed from his 3 wounds. The assassin, finding that he no longer cried out, lifted his head up by the hair. His eyes were closed, and the mouth was distorted. The murderer, supposing him dead, let fall his head and disappeared. Then Caderousse, feeling that he was leaving him, raised himself on his elbow, and with a dying voice cried out with great effort, "Murder! I'm dying! Help! Reverend, help!" This mournful appeal pierced the darkness. The door of the back staircase opened, then the side gate of the garden, and Ali and his master were on the spot with lights. End of chapter 82.
And cut. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for listening to today's episode of I've Been Meaning to Read That, with me, your host, Dan. If you want to learn more about the show, you can follow us on Instagram at Meaning to Read and TikTok at I've Been Meaning. If you want to support the show to help keep it going, you can find me on Venmo at Dingus Donut, DINGUSDONUT. Supporters get a shout out on the show, and even more important, get to vote on the next book that we read. No matter what, I'll see you for our next episode. Until then, read those books you've been meaning to read, and have a lovely, lovely day.